Alrighty, so the next part of this tutorial is that we are going to make those skin boils. So I'm just going to move everything to the side over here because we once again have to go after our base mesh. And we're going to just do the same process that we kind of just talked about before. We want to start on frame 1 with the head, and we're going to basically just freeze it in place. We're going to use a time shift, and we're going to use our pyro spreading source tools again. So we're going to put a time shift here, and we're going to go start. So that's going to freeze it on the start frame. And I'm also going to just actually change where this is sampling and use the point deform up here. I find that any holes in the mesh cause a lot of issues. And then we're going to go over here to the pyro spreading fire, and we're just going to bring in that tool. We're going to delete everything like this. And for some reason, Houdini wants to port that box over there. So we're going to bring this in over here and go like this. So we're going to scatter some more points across our character. But one might be too much, so we're going to do 3. That. Now we're going to do our hot group. So once again, we're going to go remove keep in bounding regions, and we're going to select an area. So we're going to go down here, and we kind of want this growth to, move faster than the areas that are getting eaten away by the flash. So once again, we're gonna have to make this group hot and give it a higher enough rate where when it starts to burn, it moves faster a lot than everything else, or around the same speed. We're actually going to reference a bunch of parameters that are on our previous source spread up here. So we're gonna go up here and over here on our original source spread, what we're going to do is I'm going to go over here where it says attribute transfer, create reference copy. So we're gonna grab that. It's gonna create a reference copy of this. So we're gonna disconnect it, and we're gonna drag it down here to the end of our node tree. So these two things are kind of linked together. Like that. And hopefully, if we turn off our point visualizer, we should have some. Now I'm gonna try and visualize this. Great. And so we're gonna, somewhere along the lines, I think we need to go select a new hot group. Somewhere along the lines that didn't work out, so we need to select our base group again. So down here, enter, and go back to frame 1 before we simulate everything over again. And we should get something that looks like this. Cool, so now that we have our growth like this is looking really nice. So we also want to kind of take a look at everything. So burn, there's probably some areas of this burn value that I'm going to delete, and so we get some patchy areas, because it would be cool to kind of have the boils kind of appear in specific areas, not on the entire spreading burn itself. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to once again create a point deform, and we have to point deform this back into its original position. So we're going to go over here, and we're going to go point deform it down here. This also would be a really good time to cache everything out. We might have to go through our setup and actually rearrange our file cache. I have a feeling this is where everything is getting a little bit upset. The system is getting a little bit upset at me, so we're going to actually move that one up there. We're going to go back down to this point deform, and now we want to transfer these attributes. Well, not really. We want to start deleting everything. So we want to delete by total burn first, because we want to go within the radius that we want these boils to be. So this is going to be points, delete by expressions, and then at total burn, like that. Perfect. Now we want to go back to our simulate spread and visualize. We want to get burn. So now let's go back and add another delete underneath. I'm going to call this one total burn, and this one's burn. And for now, we're going to go points, delete by expression, add burn, and we've got some areas of radius that we can now isolate. So this is great. So we have, those are where our boils are going to show up. So now perfect, we have our emitter of how the boils are going to look, and if we visualize our area, this is cool. Now, we also have to delete the areas on these points where, it's getting eaten by everything. Like our skin is kind of melted away because we don't want the boils to appear in that area. So what do? We need to go over here and grab our total burn attribute up here and then blast it away like everything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to just delete any conflicting attributes that might happen, so, or cause us grief later on. So we're gonna go and delete everything like this. So now we're gonna not see our point visualizers, but if we go over here, we're gonna grab the total burn attribute over here too. So I'm gonna go attribute transfer, place that down here, and we're just gonna place that there, and we're gonna copy our blast node up there and place that over here. So now our points should not be in that area where the skin has now rotted or melted away. The next thing we want to do, and I'm going to do this above our attribute transfer because it might cause us a little bit more grief if we do it otherwise, is kind of set up the P scale because we want this to kind of grow and mesh and look disgusting. So the first node I'm going to drop down is an attribute randomize P scale. So attribute name P scale, and what I've done here is use a custom ramp, and I've just given like some random values to these ramps. So you can set this up any way you like. This is just the way I've done it. Just kept it on the interpolation default. But yeah, it's just using custom ramp. Then from there, I'm just gonna placing down a little wrinkle, which I'm using to modify my P scale. So it's gonna be, basically this is gonna allow me to kind of scale up everything as I see fit. This is using something called colors. So I'm not gonna totally get rid of total burn quite just yet, so I'm gonna go total burn color. So go back to that attribute, delete, and just keep total burn in color, and you should have something that looks like this. And then underneath I have an attribute VOP that I'm placing down, and I'm just fitting the P scale between these values because I don't want to get too big, and after a certain point when it reaches a certain size I want it to stop. So I'm just clamping those values. And I'm doing that with a bind tool, a fit, and a bind export. And I'm going to call this P scale fit. So you might be wondering at this point, like, we have to transfer total burn back down over here, so I'm going to add another attribute delete because now we don't really need this, and I'm going to delete, you know, our color, and I'll total burn because we don't need that anymore. And what we're also going to do right now is we are going to add a VDB from particles, and we're just going to put this down here. And VDB from particles is really useful because it actually, you know, senses P scale, and so it will actually look for it, and it will actually, you know, create some really interesting shapes for us. So VDB from particles, so our P scale, or we might need more points, I'm thinking. So let's go up here to our source points, and I'm just gonna increase this to something greater, but we also have to change where we're sampling our points because the point count has changed. We also have to create a new source group for our points. So what we'll do here is just select that and kind of get started from there. So our P scale isn't working. I'm just gonna fix it real fast. We're gonna figure out why. So we're gonna just change the fit range. So we don't want the P scale to be in the negatives. Cool, now that we have our blood blisters, they're starting to form on the skin like this. So all we had to do to fix this was to go to our modify P scale and just take out this kind of parameter here because it wasn't really working. And basically all I'm doing is timesing it by time, so it'll grow over time. And now we're gonna use a VDB smooth. And we're gonna try our best to give it a lot of resolution, but not too much where we can't really see anything. So we're gonna play this back just to see how big our blood blisters get across our skin. So we're gonna give Houdini a few seconds. All right, so this is looking pretty good. We've got some blisters moving up the skin like this, and it's gonna be pretty slow. So what we're going to do next, I'm just gonna check, and now I'm gonna convert this to polygons. And we might lose some resolution in this process, or it might make it super heavy. It's really dependent on the system here. And we are going to color this, probably red. And we're going to go red, like that. And I'm going to add a file cache at this stage so I can speed up the process and check in to see how everything is going. So I'm going to call this boils, and we are going to go save to disk. And while that's cooking out, I'm going to use a null. I'm going to put this at the end of the node tree. And I'm going to color this yellow. So while we wait for that to cook out, we will do a quick flipbook, and then we will kind of factor in what we should do next. Alright, so our flipbook is done, and you can see our boils kind of crawling up the face like that. We've got some weird kind of glitchy twitch where like some of them, it's kind of moving around a bit, and for some reason it's kind of like moving, and we kind of want them to be a little bit static. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to fix that. It's getting to a good place where I think we are almost done with the skin boils. So what we're going to do is go up here where we had our point to form, and we're going to take it out. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to move this all the way down here where we have just before we start to remesh everything. We're going to also move this down here and connect it into right after our blast. So it's going to go right here. So the idea is now that we're not point deforming this until, you know, this is getting eaten away. It's not going to affect the piece scale too much. So I'm going to resim this again, and I'm going to save to disk. I'm going to wait a bit. Alrighty, so now that we've kind of switched things around, the idea is that they shouldn't move anymore, but they are. So we are going to try and fix that once again. I'm going to move this down here because I think that's going to be better. So we have discovered it's a p-scale problem. So what we're going to do is actually, it's all due to this guy somehow. So we're going to get rid of this. So we're just going to remove these two p-scale things, and then that should work. So we're just going to also, now that we've fixed the p-scale issues, we're going to fit to value 1, increase the size, so we have more bigger blotchy patches like that. And we'll go over here and we'll also play with the overall shape and feel of this as well. So that will work fine, I think. Okay, awesome. So let's recache this out, and this should work just fine. So while that saves and continues, we're going to just put this in a little network box, and we're going to call this our blood boils, and then we're going to resume with the last half of this tutorial. And we're going to call these boils blood. Now, we're going to use the same points that we used for the emitters for our blood boils as the emitter for our fluid. So fun stuff there. We're going to have to go over here and sample the @total burn over here. And we're going to just plug that into here, and this will be the out for blood spurts. Alright, so now for the final stage, we are going to have to build our blood spurts. So I'm actually going to sample the out boils down here instead, because I think if we scatter things onto the surfaces, it's going to work out a little bit better. Now, what I'm also going to do, I'm also going to have to set up the velocity and also cull any of our emitters that are going to be, or anything that we're emitting from that might be inside of our head. What we're going to do now is I'm going to bring in an object merge, because I don't like going and, you know, keep on navigating up towards my node tree. I like to use object merge just to sometimes bring things, make my scene a little bit more tidy. So I'm going to bring in my base mesh and go to my group, and we're going to call this cull. We're going to go points, and we're going to go $OS, and keep in bounding regions, objects and vertices. So anything that is inside of this object now, we can now cull away. So we're going to delete. We're going to go delete non-selected, points, and cull. And now we should have the faces that are on the outside of our face like that. And now the way we're going to add the velocity is that we wanted to emit away from the face. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to drop down a VOP. We're going to add an attribute VOP like this, and we're going to go and grab an extract centroid point. So we're going to go extract centroid from our main head that we just brought in over here. And what we're going to do is just plug that into the second input, go over here and switch that to detail. So now we have a center point of the head that you can see right there. And it shouldn't really change its position too much, but that's just based on how the polygons are getting eroded away. So basically what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to call this VOP velocity. And we are going to put in an open point cloud open, bring in the second input, and scale up the radius to something huge like 1,000. Then we're going to go over here and we're going to add a subtract, link up the position and place this into velocity. So I'm going to turn on my velocity visualizer right now. You can see how the velocity will be affected by the next step. And then we're going to use a point cloud filter. Like that. So now the velocity should be coming from the center point of our object as it gets emitted away. So if I go over here, you can kind of see it's all facing outwards on the face. Now what I can also do if I don't like the way, you know, the velocity is facing, because, you know, it's coming downwards a little bit, I maybe want my velocity to be in perhaps more like that. I'll just adjust my center point with a transform. So now if I ghost my head, this is what it'll kind of look like. Velocity looking like that. So now we can get started on emitting our fluid, and we're going to drop down a scatter right after this. And we're going to scale this down and give that a super high number, and then we're going to use a pop network. Place this down here, and we are going to also have to set up collisions. So what we're going to do is we're just going to once again put down a ground plane and make sure it doesn't intersect with the face. And we're going to go physical and lower this like this. So that should be enough distance, I think. Now what we're going to do next is just delete that, and we are going to add gravity. Place that underneath there, go to pop object and turn off the bounce on our blood because we don't want that to happen. We're gonna, because we have velocity now, we do need to add some pop drag so it slows some forces down. And now we're going to go points, and we're going to use 34. So let's play this back, see what happens. So now we have, I think we need to add some forces. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some pop force. And we are going to go swirl size. You can see it, it's not really picking up our velocity too much, so you might have to edit that a little bit. Because it is kind of jumping forward, like particles are kind of jumping forward, but not in the way that I'd kind of like. So I'm going to just add some more drag to see what happens. I'm going to also go down to here and go negative, backwards, and see what happens with this. Okay, that made everything a little bit too messy, so I'm going to start switching up my interpolation sources to see what happens next. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. I think what we need to do next is add more forces. So we're going to add another pop force in here, give it some turbulence. And we're going to make a swirl size a little bit smaller So a little bit more chaotic. And I think our interpolation source is kind of getting in the way a little bit. It's still making some interesting mistakes. I'm still getting some weird jumpiness, so I'm gonna add some sub-steps. We have our blood kind of dripping out the face. Got some more strobing still happening, so what we're going to do here is just crank up that turbulence. And we are also going to turn off interpolation source. We're trying to remove as much strobing as possible in our simulation and trying to narrow down the results that will work best for us. So I think we'll honestly need a little bit more force again. So we're going to add another pop. I'm going to add a pop wind this time. And you basically, with noise in simulations, you want to layer it just enough so you can remove strobing, that when things fall, they don't fall uniformly and they actually have some randomization to it. Now we have to have sort of the spurting action happen, which the spurting action is going to be driven by a few different things. First of all, we're going to need to go up here to our source first input and animate the impulse activation so it only goes off every few frames and, you know, actually stop spurting at a certain frame. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. For the blood here, what I've done is I basically told Houdini every 12 frames kind of make a blood spurt. So it's going to do this, make a blood spurt, and then after frame 72, stop. So I'm going to copy this and put this into impulse, the constant activation, so make a relative reference. And then you're going to see it's only going to spurt every 12 frames. So now we can make this spurt even more violent, where we can say, okay, well, I want a little bit more particles because we want a lot of detail here. And I'm going to crank up my velocity to 2, so we'll get that kind of blood pattern. I'm also going to say, I'm going to adjust my pop one so there's more force here. And I'm going to also, what I'm going to do is just increase the amount of points. I'm also emitting by another, like, 1,000. I'm also going to add another merge. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another source stream. I'm going to copy this and paste it over here. But the only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to get rid of this impulse activation. So delete channels, put this back to 1. So now if we play this back, we should have blood that kind of flows. But also you might notice it's kind of hard to see now because we're using the same emitter. What I'm also going to do for Houdini is I'm going to say, hey man, for these scatter, these points here, I'm going to basically add a group by range. And I'm only going to select a certain amount of points, and that's going to be points that I'm going to emit from that's going to have a constant flow up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call this particles. And I'm going to go points. I accidentally clicked offset, my bad. And I'm just going to increase this range so I can select, not all my points, but just a couple. And see if I can select more. Okay, cool. Now we have a point group that we're going to emit from. And we're going to go over here to our source group, particles. And we are going to also go over here where it says inherent velocity. And we're going to just tone that down. So you kind of have something like this. So now you can see, comparative to the other one, like this one just flows downwards. And then there's blood spurts that happen every few frames. Now I am going to add a little bit of velocity into this. And I'm also going to go to my pop first here, and I'm just gonna, I think I want the blood spurts to actually happen every 6 frames instead of 12. I think their impact on the sim is going to be much more apparent if they're emitting every 6 frames than 12 frames. So I think that's good for now. Let's try and add this back into our overall bigger picture and see how it looks. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start deleting anything that I don't need. I'm just going to keep the velocity for now, and I'm going to refresh the viewport because Houdini is going to freak out. And so reset viewport object. So that's kind of where our blood spurts are right now. And we are going to cache this out. And we're going to save the disk in background. And while that caches out, I want to bring our blood boils to the source surface so we can like check this out. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a geo node down here and go boils, add a geometry node or an object merge. And we're going to bring in our boils like that. And this is going to help us while we kind of can just let us reference, I guess, where our simulation and those boils are going to be. Now the next thing is the fun part, which is, you know, particle meshing, particle, fluid, surface, which is a fun little tool that can get annoying pretty fast if you don't know how to use it properly. So what we're going to do here is we're going to lower our particle separation, we're going to decrease our droplet scale, and we are just going to lower this particle separation until we can get a really good fit for this blood, and try and figure out something that is going to really work. And you might see also we have to lower our ground plane because it's kind of hovering above where the other blood is, and that's not cool. So what we're going to do next is I'm just going to lower this a little bit, and we're going to probably have to resimulate our particles so the collision objects match the same height. Cool. We got some ugly little thickness happening. Great. And then I'm going to lower this to 2.8, and I think that's okay for now. So I'm going to go here and cancel cook, and we're going to adjust that ground plane. Okay, so for our ground plane we actually have to lower it to negative 0.03, and what we're going to do next is save the disk, and we're also going to have another file cache right after this one too as well, because we need to cache out the particle. We'll be basically almost over, and while that is caching out, we're just going to place this in a network box, and we're going to call this blood spurts. I also want to double check something before I go forward, and I want to go back into my particle network and go navigate over here and check when my impulse activation is, because it's emitting for all frames. I probably don't want this. I want it to probably end after a certain frame, so we're gonna say, maybe let's say 65. So I'm actually gonna cancel cook again and save the disk in background, and we're gonna let that cook out. Alrighty, so one cache is done. We're gonna move on to the mesh cache, and we're gonna save the disk. And hopefully by the end of this, we're gonna have some awesome blood flow. So I'm gonna let that cache out, and then we're gonna jump up here, and we're going to create another geometry node, and we're gonna create blood spurts, and we are going to bring in an object merge, and we're gonna go grab that blood. So we're gonna go do this, out blood spurts. So by the time this is all cached out, we're gonna just wait for that, and I'm gonna flip book it, and I'm gonna show you the end result. Oh yeah, so one more thing is that we forgot to give this color to represent it being blood, so we're gonna add some red to it as well. Okay, so this is our simulation so far. As you can see, there's a few different issues happening, especially with our blood clots. They're a little bit jittery, so we're gonna go in and fix that. And I think our blood is actually falling a little bit too fast overall. Like, we've got the blood falling down from the skin, I think is a little bit too fast. And also the blood spurting out of the skin, I think is too fast overall as well. So we're gonna go in and refine that, and then to give it another shot. So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna put Houdini in manual mode, and we're gonna go over here to our blood pour. And what I'm gonna do over here is I'm going to add some drag forces. So what that means is I'm just gonna add a pop drag. And so the pop drag, I'm just gonna add some air resistance. So probably like some 3. I think that's good, and we'll cache that out. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to head over here to our another pop network, because actually before we touch that we actually have to fix our emitter over here. So I have a feeling the reason why this is getting jittery is because of our burn values, because our burn, if you remember, changes over time. We do have some jitteriness. Let's go check our flipbook. Let's go find, label all our points. I'm also going to add a time shift right here, see if that does anything. So do a $F, start. Okay, so it is our P scale. Okay, so we're gonna have to correct our P scale. It looks like we're gonna have to do a constant, have to do a different way of modifying this P scale. So we're gonna use uniform continuous. I'm going to put the P scale above total burn. Okay, we just have to rearrange things. So we're going to put this back on the ramp. And now that I'm just going to turn these ones back on. This will hopefully get rid of our jittering. So we're going to show all objects again. And I'm going to go back up here to my P scale. And I think I'm going to just lower that. And also going to lower that. And for this, I'm also going to, before I point deform everything, I think something's a little bit off, so I'm going to add a little, because you can see it, the blood kind of intersecting with the mesh a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a null right here. I'm going to add a ray, like right here. And minimum distance. So hopefully that sticks above everything else now. So now what we're going to also do is I'm going to just play with my custom ramps to try and adjust everything. We skim through the frames now. Yay, nothing moves out. So we'll just recache that, and now that that emitter is good, we'll go back over here and check in on our falling blood, and we'll save that mesh out to disk. So now that we're done with this, we're gonna just put Houdini back into manual mode, and I'm gonna go back in here and I'm going to slow everything down. So I'm gonna triple the amount of drag I have. So I'm gonna add 5 more drags to this, and for my source first input here, I'm actually going to lower my inherent velocity, and I think from my wind, I'm also going to just chop that in half as well. Less forces means, you know, actually instead of reducing the number of forces, I'm just going to adjust this, and I'm going to push some pop drag down here, and I think over here I'll reduce this to like 1.5. And I also think that I can remove some substeps now, because substeps will make it go faster as well. And so we'll wait for those to cache out, and I'll do another, and then I'll cache these out as well.